I need a glass of Patron. Bad as I need a horn. Stabbing my clavicle bone.
All right, so the best distractions are true, right? That's what makes something a fantastic distraction. And I absolutely believe the Tartaria stuff is true. That's why it works. It's really strange how people have such a hard time with the phrase distraction, with the word distraction. And it's like they refuse to understand what's being said. And you know, when something's a distraction, that doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean it's not even important. You know, it just means it's distracting you from what the real thing is, what you should be looking at. And that's why Tartaria works so well, because it's the gift that keeps on giving, man. It's something where especially if you're like into sort of the conspiracy world and you're not used to getting your shit kicked in all the time, and you're not used to, you know, all of the turmoil that comes with being a truther. And you know, you're looking for stuff, you're trying to find information about stuff, trying to find, you know, the truth. That's where, if you're looking at Tartaria, you're gonna get nothing but reassurance, nothing but truth, nothing but a positive reinforcement for everything you do. You know, that's why Tartaria is so great. It's nothing but positive reinforcement. When you look into Tartaria and you start looking at you know, ancient buildings and whatnot, you're gonna get, you know, if you go, I wonder if this really old ornate building is falls into the Tartaria category. You know, I wonder if it has an old a great fire in its history. Yes. I wonder if the building company who actually built it is a mystery. Yes. I wonder if the designer of the building was found because of a contest. Yes. I wonder if that person, you know, basically only built the one thing to their name. Yes. Like it's constant. It's a constant reassurance that you're on the right path. And that is what makes it such a great distraction. You know, that's what makes anything a good distraction. That's why the pedophile situation is a good distraction. Because you know you're on the right path. You know you're doing the right thing by talking about and exposing this horrendous element of our society. You know, it's not like you know, unless you insist on being religious and whatnot, and then I guess that would be a sort of a kick in the nuts. That's why chemtrails is another great distraction. All you got to do is look up and you can see the evidence of chemtrails. And you start talking about that even more in depth. You start looking into it further, and it's just nothing but shit. You know, you'll see the chemtrails. Why did you have your lights on to turn in there? That was fucking weird. The cop needed to make a turn, so he turned on his emergency lights. But he didn't go to an emergency. Anyway, that's what Tartaria does. That's why Tartaria is fantastic. And I'm assuming it's the same two Israeli trolls that are watching my feed right now. That always are. That's why there's no opposition to what I'm saying, because I'm telling the truth. How can you contradict or debunk what I'm saying when it's the truth? But that's, Tartaria is awesome. It really is. And the thing is, this is the part where it's like where the distraction comes in, because when it comes to Tartaria, we can speculate all we want, and we can have really accurate speculation, and it's you're speculating, but it's obvious, and the other side of it just doesn't make any sense. It makes it really hard. Like, I was watching this documentary on Jack Johnson today, watching it with my kids, and the whole time I'm looking, and they're talking about, this is 1903, 1905, whatever, and I'm looking at the backgrounds, always looking at the backgrounds, and you see these huge cities, and you have to ask yourself, who's building all of this? These cities are old. Who decided to build these huge buildings, and how? It's one of those things where it's just everywhere you look, and it's obvious. And once you see it, it makes it really hard to engage the world and the way you're supposed to. And I'm just gonna watch this Jack Johnson movie, but I'm only gonna focus on the thing I'm supposed to focus on. And the thing what makes it the biggest distraction, we can't do anything about it. All we can do is speculate. That's all we have is speculation.
Yeah, but they're all in a
because
position
we can't
to come out and visit. You know what I mean?
we can't get those answers. We can't say, okay, I want the truth about this, because you just never find it. So we're stuck arguing. Most of the time we're stuck arguing about shit that we can't really answer. I've chosen to like this perspective, and in doing so I've found a bunch of evidence for said perspective. And you've chosen the other perspective, and you probably have a bunch of evidence for that as well. When the reality is, we only know what the keepers of the information want us to know. And that then brings us to the Jews and Israel. Imagine if all of the Tartaria people instead of spending a bunch of time on Tartaria, were actively opposing Israel, actively calling out the genocide that's happening. If we were all unified in our anger, and all of that effort, that energy, that debunking that goes into Tartaria was used on the Jewish story, was used on the Jewish supremacy that controls things, and we did nothing but look into that and try to figure that out. That's where the distraction comes in. Because instead of us talking about what's happening right fucking now, the incredible history that's happening right now, we are distracted by something that is, who knows how old. We can't change it. We can't prove it. We can't, we can't do anything but work with what they allow us to have. And most important, we can't change it. Okay, so we argue back and forth about, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, and then finally, okay, that's that. It just ends. Whereas with this Israel shit, you know, 36,000 plus women and children have been killed since October 7th. Innocent women and children killed since October 7th. And done in the most cowardly way of dropping bombs on them from fighter jets when these people don't even have, guns, let alone fighter jets. Right now you have the next generation of the richest of the rich is opposing Israel. And because they're opposing Israel, the Jews all across the country are coming out and making it about Judaism. The thing is blowing up in front of them, and they're lighting the wicks. They're adding more dynamite to the fucking pile. And that's if imagine if we were all focused on that. Instead of talking about Tartaria, we were talking about the fact the parents are nowhere to be seen. Whether it's in support of their children or in opposition to their children. Either side is very telling. The fact that they're not condemning their children is telling. There's not this huge, number of, no, my children, the Jews are okay. What they're doing is okay. That's not happening. But at the same time, those parents aren't out there condemning their children, or they're not supporting them because they can't, because they probably work for a Jew or something like that, and they're not condemning them because it's their children, and they know it's right. They're not out there saying that that's just wrong. That's just because they know it's right. There's nothing that can be said. If you notice, the protests are never being like debunked. Nobody's ever taking what the protesters are protesting and saying, no, you're misguided, you're wrong here. This isn't correct. The whole thing with the protests is that we're not allowed to do it. How dare all these goyim, talk about these Jews like that? We're not supposed to talk about the Jews. We're not supposed to talk about Israel. We're supposed to talk about Tartaria. Why do you think Tartaria is this huge secret, right? It's everywhere. And you're not going to get your page interrupted or fucked with for talking about Tartaria. As a matter of fact, you'll probably get a lot of views out of it. You'll probably get a lot of attention out of it. Can I see your phone for a second? Thank you.
Chris is moving the 15th, a week from tomorrow, to Idaho.
Good. Took way too long. It still took way too long.
First person that called me when I had that.
I don't think you should. I never said anything about not seeing her, so I don't know what you're justifying it to me for.
I'm just saying. I love her, but she drives me crazy. But she was there for me when I desperately needed it. And I had my family back too. So that's also a lot of energy. we're supposed to have the largest cicada population this summer or whatever. Like it's supposed to be this crazy year of the cicadas. We haven't heard any.
I see they're putting up black barricades for the protests in America. I don't know what that is. I haven't seen anything like that.
The Ivy League schools.
I don't know. Yeah, around the White House, they're putting up the barricades for what protests? It's being done right now with forklifts. Thanks. Uh,
So they're
It's hilarious.
redoing the fence, it says. The current fence is 6 feet 6 inches tall. It's going to be replaced by an approximately
12.
13
I was going to say.
feet tall fence with wider and stronger fence posts. The new fence incorporates anti-climb and intrusion detection technology and is designed to mitigate current and future security threats.
Talk about your transparency of government. A lad just unalive. Huh. I appreciate it. I guess there's Palestinian protests this weekend. So that's what they're saying. You know,
Somebody crashed into the
when
security barrier of the White House and died.
when you look at this type of stuff, when people want to talk about, vaccines or chemtrails or anything like that, what does the government do to actively combat that? The only thing that happens with those things, message retracted. All your messages were retracted? That's weird.
Okay, so they're having a spring garden tour event being held at the White House today.
Who decided that your messages should be retracted? Did you do that or did the system?
So there's streets that are going to be closed, sidewalks are going to be closed. It's also imposing a public use limitation and will not allow laptops, tripods, selfie sticks, large bags, drones, packages, animals, bicycles, umbrellas.
For what?
It's some spring garden event.
Huh. That's weird.
The park area will be closed from approximately 9 a.m. until 6 p.m. on Saturday. So I don't
know. I don't know who Colin Goddard is, but I guess your messages are all retracted. I don't get it. I don't understand what's happening here.
I don't know. There's all kinds of different reports. I think it's bullshit.
What's bullshit? When there's all sorts of different reports, when there's all sorts of different reports like that, it's to keep you from figuring out what's really going on. Exactly. Right. So there's clearly something happening. They just don't want you to know why it's happening.
So they're going to just keep giving you runaround article.
Right. Exactly. That's how they operate. That's how this whole thing works. It's all about distractions. This is what I keep telling. It's all about the distraction. The distraction is it's given to us. The whole thing with COVID. COVID was about distracting us. It wasn't it wasn't the secret. COVID was about distracting us and having us, not paying attention to the whole Epstein thing. And one of the biggest smoking guns with that is the fact that like COVID basically ended the day after the Epstein trial ended, the day after the Prince Andrew trial ended. The day after the chick who said she wasn't going to fucking stop, she was going to push, blah, 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 Virginia Giuffre, whatever her name is. She said she was going to push this to the moon. Then suddenly she's offered 16 million pounds, and that's that. She's done. And honestly, I can't blame her. I'd shut the fuck up for $16 million. You'd never hear from me again. And I'd be out enjoying my fucking $16 million. But when you look at the that was when it was the day after that the whole announcement took place. Maybe it was the next day, I don't know. But it was suddenly all of the governors all over the United States all just decided that mask restrictions were all going to be lifted and everything was going to go back to normal. They all did it on the same day. There was no reason why. There was no breakthrough. There was no, nothing. It was just like, okay, the distraction's over. And you'll disagree with me, I'm sure. But you don't remember where we were in 2019. Most of you have forgotten that 2019 started with us supposed to be angry at Michael Jackson fleeing Neverland or whatever it was released, and we were all supposed to hate Michael Jackson, and we were supposed to run out and get vaccinated to save us from the measles. The measles were, oh my God, there's 1,200 measles in these two Jewish communities that are right next door to each other. There's 1,200 cases nationwide, and 800 some of them were in these two Jewish communities. But hey, let's not restrict travel to and from Israel. Let's not make it the China flu. It wasn't like they were the Israeli the measles. The same propaganda bullshit that happens with everything else somehow didn't happen with that. Other than them trying to get us to get fucking shots for the measles. And then Epstein died.
The Gardasil shot commercial came on yesterday when Nick and I were watching TV. And he goes, "Isn't that AIDS, Mom?" And I said, "No, baby, that's HIV turns into AIDS, not HPV. This is different." He goes, so he's asking me about it. So, I explained it to him. It's a disease that's transferred through sexual activity, and they're now trying to get us to give our teenagers these shots to prevent it, because that disease can turn into cancer later on in life.
Maybe. That's just what they tell us, that we don't know that.
So, and he was like, "Well, are we going to get it?" And I said, "No, dude."
What about our history makes you think you're going to get a vaccine?
I said, "No, we're going to educate you guys on how to try to prevent getting it to begin with. But it's a very common thing, and it typically goes away pretty quickly." And
my wife doesn't understand. She doesn't realize just how much I fight my programming. And I was raised to that a man needs to fuck as much as he can, whenever he can, whoever he can. If the opportunity is there, you should take it. You know, who cares about relationships? Who cares about, just get that pussy every chance you can get. And I've done, you know, it's hard for me. I mean, I don't know any of that stuff. You know, I don't know how to be that person necessarily. Like I'm doing everything I can to try to prevent my kids from being that piece of shit that we're programmed to be. And it's difficult. It goes, you know, it goes against my programming all the time. But that, you know, I'm definitely trying to prevent that from happening, from them being sluts. Because, you know, that's the best way to catch something, is to be out there fucking.
Especially if you don't wrap the shit up. So we had a discussion on how important condoms are, and then right after we talked about it, we were watching Chicago PD, and Burgess goes undercover as a whore.
Whore.
You know, with Nadia, they go into that, and the dude grabs her.
First of all, like, cops are that hot. Secondly, like, whores are that hot. That should be the giveaway right there.
And she was like, "Hang on, baby, let me grab my purse." And he's like, "You don't need that." She goes, "You don't have a condom." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And he let her grab her purse. And I said, "See, Nick, even the hookers know better."
The hookers should absolutely know better.
Perfect, you know, from our conversation. So yeah, we had the whole Gardasil shot conversation. He was concerned, are we gonna have to? No. And I'm sorry, but they're masking, like, cancer is not necessarily caused by a sexually transmitted disease.
We have no idea.
What about the fucking water? What about the food? What about the air you're breathing? What about the
vaccines?
Sanitizers? What about the vaccines when they're infants? Like,
oh, your whole life.
To hide all of those as being the variables by saying, no, this is what does it.
If you were a good American at our age, you'd probably have like 6 or 8 vaccines. You know, you'd go get your flu shots. You'd get your pneumonia shots. You'd get your shingles shots. You'd get your COVID. You'd get your COVID shots and boosters. You know, and then there's a few other things that, you know, that pop up. And every single one of those, the side effects, the main side effect is that you have a chance, increased risk of getting something called GBS, or Guillain-Barré syndrome,
which is a death sentence.
Yeah, it's a slow, painful, awful death sentence.
Yep, they misdiagnosed Uncle Frank as having that. My uncle, and when he was diagnosed, we were all crying and
GBS is new.
Preparing to lose Uncle Frank. This was like 6 years ago.
I don't remember him getting diagnosed with that.
Yeah, but he was diagnosed. It wasn't that at all.
Well, I mean, it's only associated with vaccines. I've never heard of GBS coming from some other thing. Let's look it up. Let's go on an educational journey today, folks. Speaking of distractions, and see, this is one of those things that I do think is a distraction. Although, if I can prevent people from getting vaccinated, I should. But at the end of the day, it's a distraction, because unless we're talking about who is pushing the vaccines, and you know, it doesn't matter. It's GILLGUILLAIN hyphen BARRE with a little thingy over it, syndrome. Very rare, fewer than 20,000 cases per year. Doesn't seem very fucking rare to me. All right. Let's see. I'm trying to find the history of it. Okay, so let's look up. It's the Wikipedia version, right? Guillain-Barré syndrome is a rapid onset muscle weakness caused by the immune system damaging the peripheral nervous system. Why would your immune system attack your nerves? Again, I always ask people to point to your immune system. They can't, but this is the if you were to hear that on TV and go looking for this shit, this is what you would find. Typically, both sides of the body are involved, and the initial symptoms are changes in sensation or pain, often in the back, along with muscle weakness, beginning in the feet and hands, often spreading to the arms and upper body. You know what it sounds like? Sounds a lot like polio. Sounds a lot like they changed the name of polio, because if you were watching all of these vaccine commercials and it said you have an increased risk of getting polio, how many people would still do it? How many people would run out and get their vaccines knowing that you had a chance of getting polio because of it? So instead, they call it something that most people can't even say right. Guillain-Barré? Guillain-Barré syndrome? What's Guillain-Barré syndrome? And the thing you know about humans is that if we feel stupid, we put our heads down. When we feel stupid, we don't ask. So when it's like when you want to know about this thing and you can't pronounce it to your doctor, can you tell me about the Gillian Bear? I don't know how to. You're gonna feel like an idiot. You're not gonna do it. The symptoms may develop over hours to a few weeks. During the acute phase, the disorder can be life-threatening, with about 15% of the people developing muscle weakness of the breathing muscles and therefore requiring medical ventilation. Gosh, that sounds. What was something that recently happened that required people to go on ventilators? Huh. They weren't able to breathe as well, and they had the solution was ventilators. Can you guys remember anything in recent memory where that was what it was? Do you realize how many like big bads there are that are, are like, well, COVID is like, well, if you have regular cold symptoms, you might not even have any symptoms and you could still be carrying COVID. Back in the day, shit used to give out bumps and rashes and, cause physical ailments that you could see. Nowadays, you're supposed to believe in shit you can't even see. More of that invisible bad guy shit. Oh, go. You are transmitting. The invisible bad guy thing is their bread and butter. It starts with the whole devil thing. The idea of the devil. Yeah, it wasn't me that did it. It was invisible bad guy that took control and tricked doing it. They tricked me. It's not the government that you can see that's fucking you and spending your money on Israel and all that shit. No, 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 no. It's the deep state. Ooh. The deep state. Argo believes in the deep state. The deep state, not the Mitch McConnells, not the Lindsey Grahams, not the Donald Trumps and Joe Bidens. No, it's the deep state. The deep state. I can't believe something that's sort of trending. The phrase trending right now is it's time to put a felon in the White House. I've seen that. I saw a cop made this video that millions of he's a cop, a fucking sheriff was like, it's time we put a felon in the White House. If he was black, would you say the same thing there, cop? How many of white America that's talking about putting a felon in the White House would be saying the same thing if he was black? None. Not a fucking one of them. It's disgusting. It's just disgusting. I'm telling you, he's gonna win. Swine, why did all your messages get retracted? Colin? But GBS is this thing where, it's causing polio in people. Here, let's finish what it says. Some are affected by changes in the function of the autonomic. How do you say autonomic? Autonomic nervous system, which can lead to dangerous abnormalities in heart rate and blood pressure. Geez, sounds like COVID. Other names: Guillain-Barré Stroll syndrome, Landry's paralysis, post-infectious polyneuritis, acute inflammatory demyelating polyneuropathy. Yeah. Muscle symptoms: muscle weakness beginning in the feet and hands, usually ascending. Complications: breathing difficulties, heart and blood pressure problems. Usual onset: rapid, weeks to hours. Causes: typically triggered by an infection, occasionally by surgery and vaccination. Treatment: supportive care, intravenous immunoglobulin, plasmapheresis. Named after Georges Guillain Alexandre Barré. Why would it be his first of four last names? Georges Guillain Alexander Barré. Why would it be called Guillain-Barré? The two hardest ones to... Georges, Jean, and Alexander, well, those are easy. Guillain-Barré, those are things that people can't say. Although the cause is unknown, the underlying mechanism involves an autoimmune disorder in which the body's immune system mistakenly attacks the peripheral nerves and damages their myelin insulation. Myelin?
The myelin sheath of your brain.
M-Y-N, myelin. Myelin insulation. Damages their myelin. Damages the insulation around their brain. We don't know what causes this. Well, we know it's sometimes caused by vaccines. But we don't know what else. Where else does it come from? Sometimes this immune dysfunction is triggered by an infection or, less commonly, by surgery and rarely by vaccination. The diagnosis is usually based on the signs and symptoms through the exclusion of alternative causes and supported by tests such as nerve conduction studies and examination of the cerebrospinal fluid. AIDS rings a bell. Autoimmune disorder, right? AIDS is so obviously something that they made. They went to Africa and said they were giving out hepatitis shots and vaccinated millions of people against hepatitis. And guess what? AIDS came out of Africa shortly afterward. Something that is it's it seems to target gays and drug users. And you can, I mean, intravenous drugs, you have a big needle between your legs. It's basically the same thing. Could be same stuff. Could be. Did you know that the AIDS medication is what usually kills people? People will be doing okay with the HIV. You know that there's no actual, you said AIDS, HIV causes AIDS. There's actually no,
Right.
there's no, there's not there's no definitive case that's been proven that showed somebody that transitioned from HIV to AIDS. It's not something that's ever happened or been documented.
But these kids are still being taught that, so I had to.
Right. They love repeating history. Well, because they're really stupid. I absolutely believe that the Jews that run the show are really stupid. And they're not creative at all. That's why they keep us around, because we're creative. I know it seems like Jews are the ones that control Hollywood and produce everything and blah blah blah, but they just take from the goyim. The average goyim sends in a script or sends in a song and they just take it. And then they produce it and they go, "Look what we made." But I think it's cuz they're really stupid. SARS, MARS, birds, AIDS, COVID, etc. Right. Swine, bat, LOI could go. Right. And those are all coronaviruses. Well, not AIDS, but they repeat themselves and their history because it's like they have a playbook. And because they can't, not only can they not come up with new plays, they really don't need to. Algo, you can absolutely attest to the fact that as soon as, I'd actually been talking about it for years prior to, but as soon as this COVID shit happened, immediately I was talking about the 76 swine flu. Well, the 76 swine flu vaccination program, I should say, because there actually wasn't a documented case of swine flu that existed in 1976, yet they vaccinated 46 million Americans alone. I don't know how many people throughout the world. But they called it an inoculation program, but they inoculated all these people and then suddenly they stopped it, and it was like this bulletin went around all the news agencies or whatnot immediately stopped taking the swine flu vaccination shot, and the reason was people were coming down with GBS at an alarming rate and suing the government and suing the vaccine manufacturers. And I know people love to be like, "Oh, the wheels of government turn slowly." When they wanted to pass the legislation that said citizen goyim aren't allowed to sue the government or vaccine manufacturers for any complications that come from vaccines, that shit went through just like whoop, 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 whoop. Thanks, Colin. Appreciate it, man. I wish you could stick around. I always appreciate the people that actually talk. But they whenever anybody talks about, they don't know if the government would do this, show them the 1976 swine flu. They literally lied. They knew they were lying, and they came up with all this crazy nonsense. If you know somebody that's been handling pigs recently, we have to test those pigs and make sure those pigs don't have the swine flu. And never mind the fact that pig sickness can't be transferred to humans just like, achoo. It has to be injected into you for you to get it. Why are you taking your messages down? I don't understand. That's weird. But this is, it's the same playbook year after year after year because we don't demand otherwise. Because we let that shit go. We were like, oh, yeah, fucking swine flu, remember? And the thing was, the one thing I kept asking people is, why is the government telling you about the 1918 Spanish flu, just like how Ford did it? Because they have the same playbook, right? Ford talked about, the president of the time talked about the Spanish flu of the 1718s and whatever, 1819s, whatever it was. That was the script that he went by. Guess what your president did at the time? He did the same fucking script because they're not smart. If they were smart, but see, I think if they were smart, they would say, but at the same time, it would bring attention to an unwanted subject. But you had, why, if in 1976, a coronavirus was supposedly going to kill everybody to the point where they did this basically mandatory run out and get your swine flu inoculation, and everybody did it. And because of the efforts, because of their inoculating vaccination program, they were able to eradicate this swine flu, this coronavirus, before it killed everybody. Why weren't they bragging about that with COVID? Why weren't they, don't worry, people. We came up with a vaccine program all the way back in 1976. And we were able to eradicate an entire pandemic. We were on the verge of another pandemic back then. Of course, people didn't have to wear masks and all that shit. We have been telling you they have been working on this for depopulation. You're wrong. I think you're wrong. See, the thing is, like, this is the standard Augo stuff, right? Instead of being able to have the deeper conversation about what you're saying, you want to be able to say, I've been telling you for years that they've been doing the depopulation thing. And instead of being able to handle my objections like any normal person would, or no, and that somebody that's right would. Somebody that's right and confident would say, okay, so what are your objections? And here, let me handle them. Like how I do it with you. Right? I don't back down from what you're saying. I try to engage and address every point that you make instead of just ignoring it and jumping to the next thing. And that's where you and I differ, right? Because you just want to be able to say this, oh, they're trying to depopulate. And I'm supposed to go, oh, they're trying to depopulate. You know, you won't address the things that I talk about, the points that I make in that discussion. And one of the things that I absolutely know is they're trying to depopulate us is one of the favorite conspiracy theories that exists. Vaccine program step by step has led us to right here. You're just wrong. I mean, again, you're just wrong. So many of the people that have been vaccinated did not die. It's what it is, man. They might be trying to lower some shit. They might be. I think what they're doing is testing out formulas. What I think, based on research, based on knowing what has happened and looking into things and not just going from the surface, I think what they did in 1976 with the 76 inoculation program is basically created what we now call autism. And I think what they did was they injected a bunch of people who then had babies. And when those babies were given their birth vaccinations, that's what kicked it in order. The combination of whatever it was that was given to their parents and passed down to them, combined with the birth vaccines, triggers what we have been, falsely called autism. Now, at first they didn't have the formula right, which is why SIDS was such a huge problem in the early 80s. It wasn't like it was a huge problem throughout all of mankind. It was just suddenly in the early 80s, up until, the autism thing started really taking off, up until they got the formula right, SIDS was a huge fucking problem. Look into death court count since 2020. More unknown causes of death than died during pandemic. See, the thing is, I know you didn't look into it. I know, especially since you're actually repeating something that you said to me at a different time, word for word, that means you heard somebody else say it. And now you're just regurgitating what somebody said. And, the whole idea of a pandemic, I don't even know when we're talking about pandemic. I don't know what the official start date and official end date of the pandemic was. But we're talking about a bunch of people that have, it's been a couple of years now. So yeah, there's going to be more people. And what COVID did a great job with is convincing people that people don't just die all the fucking time for unknown reasons. People die all the time for unknown reasons. People will be just sitting here and I was like, and die. It happens all the time. The numbers are out. You haven't looked at them. See, this is that part where this is where it always gets so difficult with you. Is because you're too stubborn to acknowledge when you're wrong. Or when I'm right, I should say. And you haven't looked into all the numbers and all that shit. That's not your style. You watched somebody that on a regular basis promotes Trump also say this bullshit and you ran with it. And what we absolutely know is that the best distractions are true. So, yeah, maybe a bunch of people have died. More people have died. That could be a true statement, but again, there could be a whole bunch of contributing factors, namely time. Namely, more unknown causes than died during pandemic. In what time periods, what time frames are you talking about? You're saying shit that's just vague enough to scare stupid people and get them to regurgitate it. But you don't have any actual information because, again, you haven't looked at those numbers. You're just regurgitating something somebody on YouTube or Facebook said. It's sad. Last 4 years. Well, the last 4 years was it was part of the pandemic. What are you talking about? The pandemic started. The first official case of COVID was in Japan or in China, in Wuhan, on December 1st. That's the official start date of the first real supposed diagnosis. It just happened to be on December 1st. Although there were multiple cases of this shit prior to that just sort of went unnamed. But I don't know what the official start date is for what they consider the pandemic and then when it supposedly ended. I mean, I still see dumbasses walking around with masks and shit on to this day. But see, again, I'm going to keep busting up your arguments and you're going to switch to something else. Instead of acknowledging that, hey, maybe that person that you were watching that said this shit that's allowed to have however many thousands of views, maybe that's the controlled opposition that we always talk about. Isn't it funny how nobody ever wants to admit that they might be watching controlled opposition? They agree that there's controlled opposition out there, and that's probably what you're watching, but not me. Huh. I would know better than to watch controlled opposition. You don't realize that you're just regurgitating stupidity a lot of the times. You need to give better numbers. This is what I'm talking about. Like if you were brought into a hearing of some sort, they would just pick you apart, and you would have nothing to say. And when it's not like necessarily a knock. It's something where you should go, oh shit, you know what? Maybe I'm less prepared than I think I am. Maybe I'm less informed than I think I am. Maybe I'm just as informed as they want me to be. Maybe. You know, this is why this is always so difficult, man. In those with severe weakness, prompt treatment with intravenous immunoglobulins or plasmapheresis, together with supportive care, will lead to good recovery in the majority of cases. Recovery may take weeks to years, with about a third having some permanent weakness. So instead of having shingles for a week or two, which is uncomfortable, it's not fun, but it's you're not going to die, and it's going to be a couple of weeks worth of nuisance. Instead of getting a cold, getting sick, oh, you could die from a sickness if you're old and your immune system is down. Well, how can I test my immune system? You can't. But we can strengthen it. We can give it some immune steroids. Here's your vaccine. It's a booster. It boosts you. Oh, you're old, so it has 3 times the amount of boosters. Then in parentheses at the bottom it says, or it even says it out loud, those with compromised immune systems may not see the same results from these shots. It's like, well, aren't those with compromised immune systems the ones that are supposed to be fucking getting this shit more than anything? And they're basically covering their bases, saying, you know, this isn't like 100% effective or anything. Lots of you are still going to get sick. This is part of it. But some of you might not. With as many times as my brother-in-law has gotten sick directly after getting a vaccine or a booster, you'd think it might dawn on him that there's something there. Nope. He's happy he got the booster because it could have been so much worse. Globally, death occurs in approximately 7.5% of those affected. 7.5%. That is huge in comparison. When they talk about how many, the percentage of people that got COVID and died from it, it's like less than 1% or less than 2% or something. So instead of having the lack of, you know, the cold symptoms, the lack of taste or whatever that comes with it for a week or two, and having a 1% chance of dying, if that, you're going to go get this thing that's more than likely going to, if you get it, if you end up getting the GBS, you're more than likely going to have something that's lifelong, some sort of affliction for the rest of your life, and a 7.5% chance of killing you. Guillain-Barré syndrome is rare. 1 or 2 cases per 100,000 people every year. That's a lot. That's a lot of people. This syndrome is named after French neurologist Georges Guillain. Oh. So it's Georges Guillain and Jean-Alexandre Barré. That makes sense now, at least. It's not what it said up top. Who, together with French physician André Stroll, described the condition in 1916. A condition that starts with the hands and feet getting weak and then leads to paralysis, breathing problems, death in some cases, wasn't properly identified until 1916? Gee, that's weird. What was happening in 1960? Oh, you know what it was? That's the year before or the year it started that the Spanish flu started. I betcha, I'd be willing to betcha. If you looked up vaccine history, you'll see there was a vaccine breakthrough. If this is from 2006, the vaccine breakthrough happened in like 14 or 13. And because they it's not like today with cars and planes and trains and shit. Took them a little bit longer to get it all over the place. 1916 is when they first described this thing that apparently hadn't fucking existed. Signs and symptoms. The first symptoms of Guillain-Barré syndrome are numbness, tingling, and pain, alone or in combination. Nobody ever fucking thought to document that till 1916. This is followed by weakness of the legs and arms that affects both sides equally and worsens over time. Again, nobody talks about that shit. The weakness can take half a day to over 2 weeks to reach maximum severity and then become steady. Almost like how they tell you that you're not going to receive the full benefits of the vaccine for a week or more until it can really get itself through your bloodstream. Gosh, that's weird, huh? Weird. In 1 in 5 people, the weakness continues to progress for as long as 4 fucking weeks. The muscles of the neck may also be affected, and about half experience involvement of the cranial nerves that supply the head and face. This may lead to weakness of the muscles of the face, swallowing difficulties, and sometimes weakness of the eye muscles. And nobody fucking talked about this until 1916 when these 3 guys got together and were like, hey, let's document this thing that's clearly been happening to people. It took 3 people to come up with this? That's usually not how that works. That's why most of the syndromes and shit you know of don't have 2 names with a hyphen. And this one is actually the Guillain-Barré stroll, but that's just too much to say. GBSS? That's too much. I'd be pissed if I was stroll. Why ain't I included? In 8%, the weakness affects only the legs. Paraplegia or paraparesis. Involvement of the muscles that control the bladder and anus is unusual. In total, about a third of the people with GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome, continue to be able to walk. About a third of the people. A third of the people continue to be able to walk. 2/3 can't fucking walk. Jesus Christ. Once the weakness has stopped progressing, it persists at a stable level, plateau phase, before improvement occurs. The plateau phase can take between 2 days and 6 months, but the most common duration is a week. Pain-related symptoms affect more than half and include back pain, painful tingling, muscle pain, and pain in the head and neck relating to irritation of the lining of the brain. So much so it hurts you. with COVID, you might lose your sense of smell and taste for a week. Boy, that's uncomfortable, huh? At least the fucking lining of the brain is left alone. Get the fuck out of here. Many people with Guillain-Barré syndrome have experienced the signs and symptoms of an infection in the 3 to 6 weeks before the onset of the neurological symptoms. So, in 3 to 6 weeks before the thing, somebody had gotten sick or had some sort of infection. And they're saying, well, you had like an infected toe like 6 weeks ago, right? Yeah, well, that's what caused your Guillain-Barré syndrome. This may consist of upper respiratory tract infection, rhinitis, sore throat, or diarrhea. In children, particularly those younger than 6 years old, the diagnosis can be, and the condition is often initially mistaken, sometimes for up to 2 weeks, for other causes of pains and difficulty walking, such as viral infections or bone and joint problems. That was a weird fucking paragraph.
Yeah.
In children, particularly those younger than 6 years old, the diagnosis can be difficult, and the condition is often initially mistaken, sometimes for up to 2 weeks, for other causes of pains and difficulty walking, such as viral infections or bone and joint problems. On neurological examination, characteristic features are the reduced strength of muscles and reduced or absent tendon reflexes, hypo or areflexia, respectively. However, a small proportion have normal reflexes in affected limbs before developing areflexia, and some may have exaggerated reflexes. In the Miller-Fisher variant of Guillain-Barré syndrome, Miller and Fisher. Those aren't Jewish names. A triad of weakness of the eye muscles, abnormalities in coordination, as well as absent reflexes can be found. The level of consciousness is normally unaffected by Guillain-Barré syndrome, but the Bickerstaff brainstem encephalitis subtype may feature drowsiness, sleepiness, or coma. Man, for one thing, it sure does have a whole bunch of variants. How is it ever fucking identified when there's so many fucking variants of it and so many different things that could happen? And they don't know it's a cause from an infection. A quarter of all people with Guillain-Barré syndrome develop weakness of the breathing muscles, leading to respiratory failure, the inability to breathe adequately to maintain healthy levels of oxygen and or carbon dioxide in the blood. Speaking of which, real quick, I was thinking about this today. The whole giant tree argument, right? We've all heard that volcanoes, that mountains, that's, you know, are petrified trees of old, right? We've seen that, all seen that documentary. There are no trees on Earth, but whatever it was, and it's really good shit, right? But the idea is that the trees used to be so much bigger because the oxygen levels were so much higher back in Earth's early days, right? Trees don't use oxygen. Trees produce oxygen, according to the narrative. So, for the trees to be huge and you know, it's because of something out in the air. Wouldn't carbon dioxide levels have to be super high, not oxygen levels? Dun, dun, dun! You don't realize this, but there's holes in all of the narratives we're supposed to talk about. That's why they give them to us. That's why they want us focused on that shit, because you're always going to have something in your brain going, wait, something's not right. Something, because it's not. I love when they talk about how animals have evolved. And these guys developed this thing to ward off the prey and the what? How the fuck do you know? And how did that work? How did they develop that? Do you understand how stupid that is? They developed that. Oh, they sat around and they were like, "Hey, all of you without the markings that look like this." Nuh-uh. And I know you. Well, they survived better because they had the markings and they bred, and then they had the markings. Sure, sure, sure. Well, they developed this extra claw so they could do this, and they developed it. Do you know how long that shit takes to happen? You don't just do that. You don't just say, "Oh, this person has the a weird birth defect where they have a fucking finger that works where the rest of them didn't." And now that finger one is gonna just keep making babies that have the finger. It's dumb. This life-threatening scenario is complicated by other medical problems such as pneumonia, severe infections, blood clots in the lung, and bleeding in the digestive tract, and 60% of those who require artificial ventilation. Why would that be the case? Why would you having trouble breathing lead to you having bleeding in your digestive tract? Look at me, the conspiracy theorist, right? Autonomic dysfunction. The autonomic or involuntary nervous system, which is involved in the control of body functions such as heart rate and blood pressure, is affected in 2/3 of the people with Guillain-Barré syndrome, but the impact is variable. 20% may experience severe blood pressure fluctuations and irregularities in the heartbeat, sometimes to the point that the heartbeat stops and requires pacemaker-based treatment. Other associated problems are abnormalities in perspiration and changes in the reactivity of the pupils. Autonomic nervous system involvement can affect those who do not have severe muscle weakness. So you can not have these symptoms but have these symptoms. You can have those symptoms and have these symptoms. You can not have any of these symptoms but then have these symptoms. But it's all under that same umbrella that it comes from, where it causes now. Here we go again, back to that same number. 2/3 of the people with Guillain-Barré syndrome have experienced an infection before the onset of the condition. Most commonly, these are episodes of gastritis or respiratory tract infection. In many cases, the exact nature of the infection can be confirmed. Again, how does gastritis or a respiratory tract infection manifest into Guillain-Barré syndrome? It manifests into something that happens to happen when you get vaccinated as well. Doesn't come from anything else other than these supposed infections that people have weeks in advance and vaccinations. Well, and surgery apparently. Code red. Code red. Approximately 30% of the cases are provoked by Campylobacter jejuni bacteria. Did I say that right? Of course, you're never going to hear these terms in any other place in your world. And they're super hard to say, so you can't talk about them with people.
Campylobacter jejuni?
Right. Yeah. The same sort of guess I had. A further 10% are attributable to cytomegalovirus, cytomegalovirus, CMVHHV-5. Despite this, only very few people with Campylobacter or CMV infections develop Guillain-Barré syndrome. 0.25% to 0.65 0.25 to 0.65 per thousand and zero point 0.6 to 0.22 per thousand episodes respectively. So the idea that this comes from those things is actually really, really far-fetched. 0.25 out of 1,000 people.
0.25?
Mm-hmm. So why don't they say 1 out of every 4,000 people? 0.25 out of every 1,000? The strain of Campylobacter involved may determine the risk of GBS. Different forms of the bacteria have different
Different forms of the bacteria have different lipopolysaccharides.
yeah, lipopolysaccharides on their surface, and some may induce illness while others will not. That doesn't sound like a very definitive cause to me. Did that sound convincing to you that they know what the fuck they're talking about? Links between other infections and GBS are less certain. So, okay, so I guess approximately 30% of cases, approximately 30% of the cases, 30% of the 2/3 of the people, 2/3 of the people have experienced an infection of some sort as many as 6 weeks earlier. Of that, approximately 30% of the cases are from this bacteria, which caused diarrhea. Oh yeah, I missed that line. The Campylobacter jejuni bacteria, they cause diarrhea. Sorry. So if you maybe had some diarrhea in the last 6 weeks, that's what caused it. It wasn't the vaccine that you got. It was the fact that you had diarrhea.
Right.
Because, most of you go 6 weeks without having diarrhea at least once, right?
So the reason the tornado sirens didn't go off for the tornado that hit through Livonia, it said uh, they activate their warning sirens based on notifications from the National Weather Service and trained weather spotters. They concluded that the storms moving through the area suddenly became severe as they entered near Schoolcraft in '96, producing an EF0 to EF1 tornado that continued northeast approximately 5 miles before dissipating. Line storms continued through Macomb, blah, blah, blah. The National Weather Service called it a spin-up storm, which didn't show up on their radars in time enough to issue a warning.
What? I mean, shouldn't there have been, even if it initially showed up without any warning, once it shows up, you send the sirens out for everywhere else. What? That don't make no sense. I was wondering, that tornado that hit this wow. Like it hit at 3:30. That's the time it supposedly hit, right? Isn't that what it said?
I was driving through it because our kids get out at 3:25.
Right. I was saying it to our kids yesterday. Like it's 3:30 now, and we're sitting at this light.
Yeah.
We had just,
Yeah. Oh, it literally. I mean,
you literally. It just missed you. It was behind you as you were driving here.
The rain was so bad, even Nick was like, Mom, how can you see to drive?
Right. I was thinking that. It was so bad that you guys should probably pull over. Good thing you didn't, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could see well enough to drive. But, you know, I just said, well, dude, I'm old. I'm doing this a long time.
So you missed, basically. You missed. Thankfully. Because that fucking weird. Definitely fucking weird. Like if it would have been 100 feet, not 500 feet more to the east, it would have hit our kid's school. Let's see. We were talking about the strain of the okay, so again, so 30% of the cases are caused by bacteria. A further 10% attributed to cytomegalovirus, which they don't even go into. They just say that's what it is. Despite this, only very few people with the diarrhea or the CMV develop Guillain-Barré. That's the 0.25 to 0.65% per thousand. So these numbers don't make sense, right?
Ugh. Really? He's doing shit now with his kid?
What's inappropriate about that?
I don't know. I didn't look at the other pictures. I don't plan to.
Well, a lot of times that shit's blown out of proportion. Especially it's blown out of proportion by people who don't fucking show affection to their kids and shit. Or don't have kids. So wait a minute. This is like some Adventures of Ron Burgundy math. You know, 60%, 80% of the time, it works every time, or some shit like that. Whatever that quote is. But 2/3 of the people, listen to this. 2/3 of the people experienced an infection, which may be a diarrhea infection. 30% are provoked by diarrhea. 10% are associated with CMV. Despite this, very few people with those two things develop Guillain-Barré syndrome, which turns out to be 0.25 to 0.65% per thousand. Or 0.25 to 0.65 per thousand. So where did the 30% and the 10% come from if only 0.25 per thousand to 0.65 per thousand develop into Guillain-Barré? Like, they're contradicting themselves in the same fucking paragraph. It's fucking stupid. Different forms of bacteria have different lipopolysaccharides on the surface, and some may induce illness while others will not. So then, if some induce illness and others don't, then that's probably not the cause. Links between other infections and GBS are even less certain. So even less than 0.25 to 0.65 out of 1,000 are associated with other types of infections. So what percent of 1,000 is 0.25? Well, 1 is what percent of 1,000? Is 0.1% of 1,000, right? No, 1. 0.1. Because 100, right?
Yeah.
So 0.1 is 1%. So 0.25 is what, like 2%?
Were you talking to me? I'm sorry.
No, I'm trying to. If let me ask, because I'm not good at this. If it's, why don't I just do the math? I see your phone, so I don't have to jump off of here. I'm not saying give it to me right this second. I'm just saying. It'd be so much easier if you could just answer my math question. Miss Smart.
I wasn't paying attention. I'm sorry.
Okay. 1,000. I'd have to do times point. No, divided by
What are you looking at?
0.25. No, that'd make it 4,000, right? So it's times.
25% of 1,000?
No, 0.25%. Or 0.25 out of 1,000.
That's 25%. That's 500. Or
No,
250. Sorry.
No.
0.2.
Listen.
1,000 times
0.25 to 0.65 out of 1,000 people. So what percent is that?
Oh, 0.25%?
0.25 to not even a full person. 0.25% of people to 0.6. No, it's not people. It's not percent. It's just people. So instead of 1 out of 1,000, 0.25 to 0.65 out of 1,000. That's zero. That's 0.00025%, right, of the population. Okay, so less than 0.0000.
Basically 0%.
Yeah, basically 0%. So less
You'd have
than.
to have 25,000 people to get that one, right?
Right. To get, you'd have to have 25,000 people
25 people out of 25,000 then, right?
to get the one. Yeah. So that would mean, would that mean 25 out of 25,000 people?
That's what I'm thinking. But that's still 0.0.
But that's not even out of the people. That's out of the people that get it.
Right.
So out of the people that actually get it, 25 out of 25,000 are caused by some sort of infection. 25 to 65 are caused by some sort of infection. And even less than that are caused by the diarrhea or the CMV infection. What is a CMV? What is a cyto... What the fuck? That wasn't what I clicked on. Okay. Human beta herpes virus. Oh, also called cytomegalovirus. So herpes. So now, so 25 to 65 out of 25,000 are caused by either diarrhea or herpes. And even less than that, what the fuck? Why did it do that? Links between other infections and GBS are less certain. 2 other herpes, so even less than the 25 out of 25,000. So 2 other herpes viruses, Epstein-Barr virus. God, it's all just fucking right. It's Epstein-Barr. The herpes virus is called the Epstein-Barr virus. Do you know how? I mean, come on. William Barr's father is who gave Jeffrey Epstein his first job as a teacher at a prestigious high school for Jews when he didn't have the credentials to do so, when he hadn't even finished college yet. And still Epstein was given that. And then after all of the Epstein, he went this way, the millions of dollars, the financial collapse, the trials, the this, that, and the other. the Secretary of State that happened to be in office at the time, because Trump had 2 or 3 others prior to, the one that was brought in for the Trump trial supposedly was William Barr, was the son of the man who gave Epstein his first real job and brought him in. And then he was brought in and he said, oh, yeah, there was no foul play here. I saw some tapes that nobody else has seen, so I know that Epstein did it. And people were like, what tapes? And they were like, oh, shit, Barr's an idiot. Send him to Alaska. We're going to send him up to Alaska to a town that no fucking political person has been in 50 fucking years. But we're going to send William Barr up there. Good luck interviewing him again. But Barr was the one that decided that we wouldn't invest, that there would be no investigation into the Epstein death. And this herpes virus just happens to be called the Epstein-Barr virus. Boy, is that... When I tell you that they're fucking stupid, they're not creative, they run from the same playbook over and over again, here's your sign. Epstein virus, HHV-4, and the varicella zoster virus, HHV-3, and the bacterium Mycoplasma pneumoniae have been associated with GBS in lesser than 25 out of 25,000 cases. In less than 0.00025% of the cases, these 2 things are associated with it. GBS is known to occur after influenza, and influenza vaccination has been demonstrated to be associated with a reduced risk. What? The vaccine that may have a side effect of causing GBS is associated with lessening the risk of you getting GBS from influenza. And the chances of you getting GBS from influenza are less than 0.00025%. Man, I wish Mr. Jet was here, watching me not use numbers. Do you know how fucking crazy this is? The tropical flaviviral, the tropical flaviviral infections, Denning fever, and Zika virus have also been associated with episodes of GBS. Previous hepatitis E virus infection has been found to be more common in people with GBS. I mean, this is the thing that's supposedly talking about the cause of GBS.
It's all a bunch of bullshit. It doesn't... the thing is, if it's real, they will just spell it out real simply.
Right, exactly.
This causes this. But since it's bullshit, you get bullshit.
Again, okay, so remember, it's less than 0.00025,
right.
0.00025% are caused by either Epstein-Barr herpes or Viscerilla zoster herpes, and the bacterium Mycoplasma pneumoniae. That's 3. GBS is also known to occur after influenza. That's 4. And then the tropical flaviviral infections, dengue fever, and Zika virus, 5 and 6. So less than 0.00025% of the things are caused by 6 other things. What if you're going to divide that by then 6 different things, you're talking about like 0.00000000000 fucking 1% of the chance that you would get it from Zika virus or dengue fever or influenza. So I mean it's zero. It's 0%.
I mean, if you're talking about how many people are on the planet,
8 billion.
8 billion.
Okay, so you have to go
So, okay.
0.00025. No, you have to figure out this first.
Hold on.
0.00025 divided by 6.
Billion. Times 0.00025. I mean, out of 8 billion people, that's 2 million people. That's significant when you get into
Divided by 6.
333 million.
333 million.
Oh, so that was 2 billion. That didn't make any sense. No, it wasn't.
So wait.
8 billion.
You have to do. You have to figure out what the 0.000 was it 0.00025 or 0.00025?
It's 3 zeros.
3025 divided by 6.
Why?
Because it's less than 0.00025% of the people get one of it comes from one of those 6 things. And definitely 8 billion people don't get it.
Right, but in the event that they would. That's million. That's billion. It wasn't 0.00025%, was it? It was 0.00025 people. Right?
No, that's what we figured. It was 0.25 people out of 1,000. So we figured that was 0.00025%. Yeah.
Percent?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 20 million people.
20 million.
Divided by
The 6 different supposed causes.
3,333,000.
It's amazing how it works out to be the 33333 thing. See? But so 333,000. If everybody in the world got it, then 333,000 would be caused by this, that, and the other. By those. But that's everybody's not going to get it. We're just talking about of the cases that get it. So wait. What's 0.25 divided by 6?
0.25?
Or 0.00025 divided by 6. Or times 6, whatever. 0.00004. So 0.0004% of the people that actually get it from influenza, or that's the equation we're talking about. So how do you even know that? How do you even know that 0.00004% of the people, like how can you say that, oh well, they definitely got this from that was from a cold? How many patients would you have to see, to be able to distinguish that this came from this? I mean, it's just these numbers are it's the opposite of when they're talking about, a trillion and shit. A trillion you can't fathom. You also can't fathom 0.0000004% of something. You can't see that. If I was like, here's a block of cheese, cut 0.000004% off of it, you wouldn't be able to. You'd cut too much. So, vaccine onset. An increased incidence, see also, vaccine onset, see also 1976 swine flu outbreak. Boy, that is strange. An increased incidence of Guillain-Barré syndrome followed influenza immunization that followed the 1976 swine flu outbreak. 8.8 cases per million, 0.0088 per thousand recipients developed it as a complication. 8.8 cases per million. So say it's 9, right? 9 cases per million times the 40 million Americans that got vaccinated. What's that? 360? 360 people? No, it was way more than that came down with it. GBS cases occurred in 362 patients during the 6 weeks after influenza vaccination of 45 million persons. 46 million. Oh, so it was, yeah, it's 46. I thought it was 46 million. Sorry. And an 8.8 fold increase over normal rates. The 1976 swine flu vaccination induced GBS was an outlier. Small increases in incidence have been observed in subsequent vaccination campaigns, but not to the same extent. Now think about this. If GBS was really that negligible, why would they tell you about it? Why would they even say GBS is an increased risk of GBS is associated with getting this vaccination? Why would they even say it if it's less than 0.00088% out of the people? They wouldn't.
Because for liability purposes.
But they wouldn't.
Cover their ass.
They wouldn't. They could. If it's at that small a number, they could just. How do you know it came from this? At 0.0008 blah blah blah, that person could have done anything else and gotten it. They could have had a fucking diarrhea in the 6 weeks prior to. How do you know they didn't have diarrhea?
Jesus. Jesus. Wait till he jumps and then oh my God. Watch. As soon as he hits now.
Wow.
Oh my God.
That ain't right. How many million people out of a million people died from COVID? How many people actually supposedly got COVID? Let alone, did 8 out of a million of those people, have lifelong affliction from COVID?
Yeah, the ones that were put on ventilators died.
No, the ones, see, these numbers are just so...
It's all bullshit.
I'm trying to like... I'm trying to almost convince myself. Like, I'm really trying, like, I'm going with I know the official story approach to this. and it's always strange to me. How many times has this happened where I've looked up the official explanation, the official narrative, the thing that your mom believes, your brother believes, my family believes, all these people believe, and both of us are sitting there going, this is fucking bullshit. What? I mean, I'm trying, but this is just, this isn't, you have more risk of like everything else than what COVID does. And when you talk about the idea that you have, I mean, they're lying. There was 4,000 lawsuits that came out of the 1976 swine flu, right? It's 1976. So 4,000 people actually stood up. Back then, people didn't stand up. And then how many countless cases went unreported? Especially, 4,000, a lot of those 4,000 were family members of somebody that died shortly after. So how many people died without that being reported as associated with it?
The reports come from when people go to the doctors, they get diagnoses. That diagnosis is put into the data, the data world, the digital world, and then they report it to the CDC.
How many people
have this many flu cases that were diagnosed this week, or
how many people got sick from their shot and then went back to the doctor?
That's the thing. Like, if you don't go to the doctor and it's not officially documented that you have this, then it's not part of those reported numbers.
And 4,000 people either had this or died. You could definitely say that 4,000, like I guess GBS is the light way to go compared to death. But to think that vaccines caused at least 4,000 people to sue, and just thousands and thousands more just didn't report it. But they're trying to say that out of the 45 million that were vaccinated, 300 something reported. This is how they base it. Well, you have an X percent chance of getting GBS based on the fact that 380 something of this reported that. Well, that's not an accurate association with what your chances are. That's just the people that reported it.
Right.
So then we say the 4,000 out of the 45 million. And then, that's the people that filed a lawsuit. How many people fucking died? That'll forever be unknown.
And then you put in the variable of
how many people died for the next few years.
All of the reports being trumped up at the hospitals. All the the causes of death.
Oh, this guy died of pneumonia. Depicted. Oh, this guy died of a heart attack. Oh, right. This guy,
so, Oh, we need more cardiac numbers to make sure we get our government funding for these patients. So, we get more money if we say this person died of cancer versus a stroke. So he's going to be marked as cancer.
They did the opposite with COVID.
Right.
Where they were marking things as COVID when they hadn't even tested it yet. I literally had a doctor tell me that. Mm-hmm. The doctor I saw for my knee, the one that did the follow-up, the non-Jew, the Jew did the surgery, but he had an Arabic woman as his like underling, cleanup crew. And her and I were talking. This was early 2020, and masks were starting to be enforced, and she was like, "This is crazy," and she was telling me that she. I was asking, she was saying she used to work in the ER, the overnight ER. And she had to quit. How did you get here? And she was like, well, I used to do this. And I said, well, how did you get here? And she's like, well, I saw all the older Jewish doctors marking death certificates as COVID when we hadn't even tested anything yet. And I just couldn't be a part of it. So I'm here now. That was what she told me. I'm not telling you what my friend told me happened to him.
My doctor he used to work in the ER and he did it for quite a few years. So he had a lot of friends that are still there. Well, we're still there. And when all the shit went down, he said almost all his friends quit because of that exact reason. They refused to misrepresent causes of death on death certificates. So
That's fucked up. That shit exists. That's real.
One of them quit because he refused to take the vaccines.
Yeah.
So the
But
hospital
that
wouldn't
is
let him work there.
like for all of you people that are gonna call me the conspiracy theorist. What are you talking about? The conspiracy is believing the thing without any information, like you do.
Okay, the big picture to all of that is clearly those are the good doctors that care about us.
I bet
And
none
they're
of the
being
ones that you know that quit
driven
were
out
Jews.
of the medical profession. So we're left with the awful ones.
The Jews, the ones that are willing to do, because and the reason that they do it is because they look at us as goyim, just like how we look at animals as meat, and we eat the meat, and we wear the meat, and we beat the meat, we abuse it, we do all these things to the animals. We race them. We in some cultures we fight them.
Fucking walking into the Townsend cooler and seeing fucking sheep upside down draining in our fucking cooler.
You know why? Because that's kosher slaughter. Because what the Jews believe is one, Goyim can't touch anything that has to do with what they ate because we're unclean. But two, their idea of the most humane slaughter possible is to hang the thing upside down by its hooves and slit its neck from ear to ear to let it drain out. Because that's a hell of a lot more humane than the bolt to the back that kills them instantly.
But we were allowed to clean out and sanitize the cooler. We were good enough to do that before they brought their fucking carcass.
That doesn't make any sense. But that's the same thing as, you wearing a mask. And then you're at the restaurant and you pull your mask up to take a bite of your food.
We were allowed to stand in the banquet kitchen lined up like little soldiers, sitting there against the wall, watching them while they're doing their whole kosher meal, and if they needed to know where something was, we were there to answer their questions. And then when they left, we were allowed
to clean it up. Oh, yeah.
For them.
Yeah.
Because they were really cautious and considerate about the mess they made, too.
Right. Because they didn't make messes on purpose, knowing that some Goyim had to clean it up.
One of the
that's what they do.
One of the Mexican dudes walked by a counter and his hand touched the counter and they fucking freaked out, went and washed it. And
do you know how insulting that is? That's a level of insult that it's so commonplace, and we just take it because they tell us to. But the idea that if we touch it, we are unclean. How is that not an abhorrent fucking, horrible racist stereotype, whatever you want to call it? How is that not something that's fucking out there? We're like, that's unacceptable.
And who are we supposed to go complain to? Mr. Wilder or the fucking HR lady? I don't remember her name. Super Jew lady with the straight, long black hair and the glasses? Who are we supposed to go complain to? The Jewish people that ran the hotel?
Or the Jewish people that run the country? I'm saying this is as a practice in general. This is not just at the Townsend. This is everywhere that kosher anything takes place.
But we had to serve them. Oh, we wore gloves, of course.
Right. Because you didn't put those gloves on. Your dirty hands didn't put those gloves on.
We weren't allowed to fill the hot box. The Jewish cooks.
No, I'm saying
filled the hot boxes.
You touched the glove and put it on your hand. So your touch was on the outside of the glove as well.
Yep.
Do you understand how fucked up that is? When you tell me I'm not supposed to fucking generalize a group of people, what do you call that?
And we were given specific orders because I did the service and the cooking parts. We were given specific orders you don't talk to the guests. You serve them quietly. You don't engage. You don't interact.
Like you normally would with people.
So it was more like we were servants to royalty and weren't worthy of talking with them. We just had to drop their food and pick up whatever they needed and, just bow our heads. And, it was disgusting.
Be seen and not heard.
Yep, it was disgusting. After, I remember the last one I had done that was like super strict. I remember telling them, like, I'm not doing these kosher events anymore.
But see,
I work front and back.
Right, so. But to think to be able to say like I don't appreciate that treatment. That's anti-Semitism. They're right. It is anti-Semitism, but it becomes this thing that's associated with like racism when you say no. I don't want to partake in your fucking racist customs anymore.
The rich people already treated us like servants. The kosher events, we were treated like fucking shit slaves.
Right, slave shit.
I'm sorry, but I'm doing a job. I'm
respect.
Right.
Respect.
It was awful.
It was, and that's literally happening all over the place, everywhere around this country. Anywhere where Jews live and do their thing, that shit is happening, and it's okay. And if you did it the other way around, you'd lose your shit.
That event, because I remember that one, it was extra bad. The day before, we had a Muslim event. And so we had to prepare the bathrooms.
How is there not Muslim essence still in the room?
That was I so badly wanted to be like, dirty Muslims were washing their feet in the sinks that you're drinking or you're washing your hands in. Is that okay? I totally wanted to just throw that in their face because no, everything wasn't completely sanitized for them, Like, we didn't sanitize all the bathrooms.
You didn't steam the drapes.
Clean
the carpets.
So there were Muslims in here celebrating their faith and everything. Last night, they ate off the same plates you're eating off of.
This is an accepted American way of life that it just shouldn't be this way. This is oppressive. This is
see that in
any other,
but the high end hotels and shit, yeah. But even when I worked at Forte, the bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvah, all that, we never transformed our entire restaurant for kosher anything. Not anything.
Maybe it's just because they didn't want you to. I mean, I'm sure somebody could have paid for that to happen.
Probably, but the owners of Forte at the time were not Jewish either.
Right.
It was that white trash lady and her young husband.
Yeah, but you're not going to turn down money.
No, but that's.
And I'm sure they pay well for that. But then again, I'm sure they get crazy discounts too.
That would have been how the Townsend does that. I don't know. Well, they charge
everybody else.
Right.
They put the cost on us.
Wonder how much high tea is nowadays.
This is disgusting.
It's disgusting. It really was.
But see, and the thing is.
And then you got to put your cooler, sanitize your cooler from all the fucking dead animal blood.
To this day, you still
refill it with your inventory. Oh,
to this day, you still think I'm out of line at some points, because that's how you're programmed to respond to what I'm saying. It's like, dude, you can't say that, but it's like, well, why can't I? Do you understand what we're dealing with here?
We weren't even allowed to taste any of the food. There would be, we would have the Arabic people come back and do, some real traditional dishes for some of the Muslim events, And they would always be like, here, taste this. Like, I got to taste the goat that one time. Here, taste this, here, taste that. Because they wanted to share the culture, and we were cooks, and they knew,
Yeah.
For the kosher meals, we weren't allowed to taste, touch, none of it. They couldn't even give us a spoon and be like, here, and get rid of that spoon when you're done. We weren't allowed to touch any of it or taste any of it. It's crazy.
It is Disgusting.
That's as close as I ever came to feeling like a fucking full-on slave.
It's supremacy.
It is.
It's Semitism. It's believing that they deserve that level of favor. And when they say it's anti-Semitism, they're right. Unless you're showing them incredible amounts of favor, that's anti-Semitism. You're not being Semitism. You're not pushing Semitism. Let's see. But back to this. Again, these numbers are just bullshit. GBS cases occurred in 362 patients during the 6 weeks after influenza vaccination of 45 million persons. So, only 362 cases, that's it. Everybody that had it definitely said something. And it was definitely diagnosed correctly, especially with all the different variants of it that exist. It was all just diagnosed correctly. Let's see. Smaller increases of incident. The 2009 flu pandemic vaccine against pandemic swine flu virus did not cause a significant increase in cases. In fact, studies found a small increase of approximately 1 case per million vaccines above the baseline rate, which is similar to that observed after administration of seasonal influenza vaccines over the past several years. So they're just telling you that the vaccine that they gave for this thing is no different than what they've already been giving out.
Then why hasn't it been effective?
Right. Natural influenza infection is a stronger risk factor for the development of GBS than is influenza vaccination, and the vaccination reduced the risk of GBS overall by lowering the risk of catching influenza. If it's less than 0.0004% of the cases, then how, what else? Okay, so if
backing up further.
Wait, just real quick. If sickness is the cause of less than 0.2, then where are all these cases coming from? If it's not vaccination and it's not sickness, what's causing it then?
Right.
Sorry.
We were always told that medicines, vaccines, all that are ineffective for viruses. If it's viral, can't get you anything. Only if it's bacterial, because viruses reside within the cells, and man has not produced anything that could penetrate the cells to contain that and kill that off. So bacteria resides outside of the cells. That's why you can take medicines. So how are they saying that a vaccine is going to be effective against a virus, which influenza is?
In the United States, GBS after seasonal influenza vaccination is listed on the federal government's vaccine injury table. On March 24, 2021, after reviewing several post-marketing observational studies where an increased risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome was observed after 42 days following vaccination with the zoster vaccines, Shingrix, the FDA required safety label changes from the manufacturer GlaxoSmithKline to include warnings for a risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome. That's that Shingrix that you never see anymore. GBS has been reported in association with COVID-19 and may be a potential neurological complication of the disease. Oh, chubby girl. And GBS has been reported in association with COVID-19 and may be a potential neurological complication of the disease. So it's COVID-19 that's causing GBS, not the vaccines, dumbass. You dumb conspiracy theorist. GBS has been reported as a very rare side effect of the Janssen and the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine for COVID-19. And European Medicines Agency, EMA, has issued warnings to the patients and healthcare providers. The incidence of GBS following the vaccination with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was originally reported as being lower than the incidence of GBS following the COVID-19 infection. More recent studies, however, found no measurable link between COVID-19 infections and GPS, while correlations with a first dose of AstraZeneca or Janssen vaccines were still positive. So, more recent studies, however, found no measurable link between COVID-19 and GBS, while a first dose of AstraZeneca and Janssen vaccines are still positive. All that shit to tell you that it's caused by this, and then at the end they're like, yeah, but it's not actually caused. Why even fucking say it? Why say all the rest of that shit? If the latest information disproves it, what's the point of saying, of painting the picture that it is connected? That's fucking goofy, man. COVID-19 has been reported as causing peripheral neuropathy, and more recently, some evidence of aggravation of the autoimmune disorders, including GBS. What are you talking about? Zymlidine, an antidepressant, had a very favorable safety profile, but as a result of rare case reports of Guillain-Barré syndrome, was withdrawn from the market. Why would an antidepressant Why would an antidepressant cause it other than it's the ingredients that the medical community uses that's causing it? Wow. This shit is fucking crazy. History. I want to hear the history of it. Jean-Baptiste Octave Landry first described the disorder in 1859. Oh. So why isn't it Landry's disease? I remember it was called that, one of the things. So that's that. In 1916, Georges Guillaume and Jean-Alexandre Barré and André Stroll diagnosed 2 soldiers with the illness and described the key diagnostic abnormality, albumin cytological dissociation, an increased spinal fluid protein concentration, but a normal cell count. 2 soldiers. So that's 2 people that were probably forced to take something. You'd be amazed how many of these things are first sort of diagnosed and coined or whatever in military barracks or soldiers. It's always soldiers. If you look at the smallpox bullshit, that started with the soldiers. You look at the Spanish flu, that started with soldiers. 1976 swine flu was supposedly started with soldiers. It's always soldiers. Oh, it's because the soldiers have more access to doctors, because otherwise people wouldn't report it. That's what it must be. C. Miller Fisher described the variant that bears his name in 1956. British neurologist Edwin Bickerstaff described the encephalitis type in 1951. Well, that's weird. Why did we do the 1956 Jew guy first? and made further contributions with another paper in 1957. Guillon had reported on some of these features before their full description in 1938. Further subtypes have been described since then, such as the form featuring pure ataxia and the type causing pharyngeal cervical brachial weakness. The axonal subtype was first described in 1986. Boy, there are a lot of subtypes of this one thing that doesn't come from vaccines. Diagnostic criteria were developed in the late 1970s after the series of cases associated with swine flu vaccination. These were refined by 1990. The case definition was revised by the Brighton Collaboration for Vaccine Safety in 2009, but is mainly intended for research. Plasma exchange was first used in 1978, and its benefit was confirmed in larger studies in 1985. What the fuck does that have to do with this? Intravenous immunoglobulins were introduced in 1988, and studies in the early 1990s demonstrated that they were less effective than plasma exchange. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? That's the history of it, huh? Let's see. Jean Landry was a French physician and medical researcher, born October 10th, 1826, died in October 1865. No date. He is credited with discovering the paralytic disorder Guillain-Barré syndrome, also known as Landry's ascending paralysis, but commonly known for George Guillain and Jean Alexander Barré, who did later research on it. Oh, look, he took one of these pictures. They all take those pictures. He was born in Le Mans, Haute-Vienne, in 1826 and became a doctor because it was the profession of his uncle. In the 1850s, he treated victims of cholera and Ois, a French department, or in Ois, a French department, and was involved in disease research from then on. In 1857, he married Claire Giustigiani, 1832 to 1901, who lived for 36 years after his death. I mean, what kind of French research department existed in the 1850s? In 1859, he documented 10 cases, 5 of his own, 5 he read about, of the disorder and termed them ascending paralysis. He noted 3 different forms: ascending paralysis without sensory signs and or symptoms, ascending paralysis with concomitant, concomitant anesthesia, and analgesia, and 3, progressing general disorder with paralysis and sensory signs. He died in Auteuil in 1865, having caught cholera from patients he was treating. So this guy was supposedly the first to document what is later called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and that's all he fucking did. And yet somehow this nobody French guy who didn't do anything else, Landry, his fucking story is pretty well known. Considering, boy, that's fucking amazing. Let's see. C. Miller. Charles Miller Fisher, who he looked like that. What? Oh. December 5th, 1913, Waterloo, Ontario, to April 14th, 2012. So he's an old guy here. 100 years old. Almost. Was a Canadian neurologist whose notable contributions include the first detailed description of lacunar strokes, the identification of transient ischemic attacks as stroke precursors, the identification of the link between carotid atherosclerosis and stroke, and the description of a variant form of Guillain-Barré syndrome which bears his name. C.M. Fisher was married to Doris M. Fisher for 68 years until her death in 2008. He had 2 sons and 1 daughter. Huh! We get more about the guy that lived in 18 fucking whatever his name is, 1850s, than we do about a guy who died in 2014, 2012. Education and career. Fisher received a BA from Victoria University in Toronto in 1935. He then attended the University of Toronto Medical School, where he received his MD in 1938. He continued training at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit and Royal Victoria Hospital in Montreal. During World War II, Fisher served as a surgical lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Navy and was aboard the HMS Voltaire when it was sunk by German gunfire in 1941. The same character! Off the coast of Cape Verde. Gosh, that is convenient, huh? Fisher was captured and spent 3.5 years in German prison camp until late 1944 when he was released. Following his return to Canada, Fisher began his residence at McGill University. At the Royal Victoria Hospital in 1946, he worked as a fellow at the Montreal Neurological Institute of McGill University. He then began working at Massachusetts General Hospital on the stroke service, beginning a long career in stroke neurology. That's it. Why is there that picture of him? Why wouldn't they use a real picture of him? That's just fucking weird. Why is this picture the picture of this dude? I mean, seriously, what the fuck is that? Why is that a thing? Fisher is credited with describing the clinical syndrome of the transient ischemic attack, mini stroke. Fisher proved by a series of pathological studies the relationship between stroke and the formation of blood clots in the heart in patients with atrial fibrillation. He also showed the relationship between stroke and carotid artery stenosis, which made preventive surgery possible and greatly reduced the incidence of subsequent strokes. He was a founder of Massachusetts General Hospital Stroke Service. He contributed greatly towards the current use of anticoagulants for stroke prevention and atrial fibrillation. He contributed greatly to the understanding of stroke, more specifically carotid artery disease and lacunar infarcts and their syndrome. With regard to the lacunar syndromes, he described the concept, the pure motor stroke and the pure sensory stroke, and the mechanism underlying the different stroke syndromes. He made a number of contributions to the understanding of cervical artery dissection, carotid artery dissection, and vertebral vertebral artery dissection in the 1970s, and that of subarachnoid hemorrhage due to cerebral aneurysms. In 1956, he reported a variant of Guillain-Barré syndrome, nowadays known as Miller-Fisher syndrome. The Fisher test is also used to describe the CSF TAP test, which may be required in the diagnosis of normal pressure hydrocephalus. Fisher died April 14, 2012 in St. Peter's Nursing and Rehabilitation Center in Albany, New York. He was 98 years old. I mean, this is fucking crazy, man. The understanding of, we're going back to GBS, the understanding of the disease mechanism of Guillain-Barré syndrome has evolved in recent years. Development of new treatments has been limited since immunotherapy was introduced in the 1980s and 1990s. Why? Current research is aimed at demonstrating whether some people who have received IVIG, I don't know what the fuck that is, might benefit from a second course if the antibody levels measured in the blood after treatment have shown only a small increase. Studies of the immunosuppressive drugs mycophenolate, mofetil, brain-derived neurotropic factor, and interferon beta, IFN weird B, have not demonstrated benefit to support their widespread use. They can give it to you, they just can't take it away. An animal model, experimental autoimmune neuritis in rats, is often used for studies, and some agents have shown promise. Glataramine acetate, quinoparamine, Fasudil, an inhibitor of the RHO kinase enzyme, and the heart drug flecainide, an antibody targeted against the anti-GD3 antiganglioside antibody has shown benefit in laboratory research, given the role of complement system of the complement system in GBS. The complement system. It has been suggested that complement inhibitors, such as the drug, who gives a shit, may be effective. In animals, it is called acute radiculoneuritis. It's ridiculous. Or coonhound paralysis, and may onset in the coonhound 7 to 10 days after transmission from raccoons. If the coonhound has not been around raccoons, the disease is called acute idiopathic pararadiculionitis. Are you kidding me? If it's been around raccoons, then it's this thing. But if it hasn't been around raccoons, then it's something else? That's fucking silly. Further reading. G.H. Steinberg Guillain-Barré 2006. Guillain-Barré syndrome from diagnosis to recovery. I mean, I'm trying to read everything I can about it, and it's just nothing. It's fucking dumb. We read signs and symptoms. We read causes. We read. Oh, let's see. Pathophysiology. Pathophysiology. The nerve dysfunction in Guillain-Barré syndrome is caused by an immune attack on the nerve cells of the peripheral nervous system and their support structures. The nerve cells have their body, the soma, in the spinal cord, and the long projection, the axon, that carries electrical nerve impulses to the neuromuscular junction, where the impulse is transferred to the muscle. Axons are wrapped in a sheath of Schwann cells that contain myelin. Between Schwann cells are gaps, nodes of Ranvier, where the axon is exposed. I mean, again, all of this shit is just who fucking they could just be saying anything. It's the Publio plop. Oh look, one of the Marx brothers is on. They're so fucking funny. Aren't they funny? Oh, aren't they funny? Uh, Different types of Guillain-Barré syndrome feature different types of immune attacks. The demyelinating variant, AIDP, not AIDS, AIDP, features damage to the myelin sheath by white blood cells, T lymphonitis, and macrophages. This process is preceded by activation of a group of blood proteins known as complement. Why would it be called that? Why wouldn't it be called something else to identify it easier? A complement? That sounds nice, doesn't it? In contrast, the axonal variant is mediated by I lower G, big G antibodies and complement against the cell membrane. I keep thinking I'm reading it wrong. And complement against the cell membrane covering the axon without direct lymphocyte involvement. Various antibodies directed at nerve cells have been reported in Guillain-Barré syndrome. In the axonal subtype, these antibodies have been shown to bind to gangliosides, a group of substances found in the peripheral nerves. A ganglioside is a molecule consisting of ceramide bound to a small group of hexose type sugars, and containing various numbers of of nasylturaminic, fuck that, of nisylturaminic acid groups. The key four gangliosides against which antibodies have been described are GM1, GD1A, GT1A, and GQ1B, with different anti-gangliosides with different anti-ganglioside antibodies being associated with particular features. For instance, GQ1B antibodies have been linked with Miller-Fisher variant GBS and related forms including Bickerstaff and syphilitis. The production of these antibodies after an infection probably is the result of molecular mimicry, where the immune system is reacting to microbial substances, but the resultant antibodies also react with substances occurring naturally in the body. It's all natural, buddy. After a Campylobacter infection, diarrhea, the body produces antibodies of the lower GA class, or the I lower GA class. Only a small proportion of people also produce I small g big G antibodies against bacterial substance cell wall substances, e.g., saccharides that cross-react with human nerve cell gangliosides. It is not currently known how the process escapes central tolerance to gangliosides, which is meant to suppress the production of antibodies against the body's own substances. Not all anti-ganglioside antibodies cause disease, and it has recently been suggested that some antibodies bind to more than one type of epitome similar one type of epitome simultaneously, heterodimeric binding, and that this determines the response. Furthermore, the development of pathogenetic antibodies may depend on the presence of other strains of bacteria in the bowel. Almost like your stomach bacteria is super important. It has been suggested that a poor injection technique may also cause a direct injury to the axillary nerves adjacent to the injection site in deltoid muscle that may lead to peripheral neuropathy. Oh, it's a result of the injection itself, not the chemical. Gotcha. The consequent vaccine transfection and translation in the nerves may spur an immune response against nerve cells, potentially causing an autoimmune nerve damage. Leading to conditions like Guillain-Barré syndrome. Boy, that is fucking crazy, huh? The diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome depends on findings such as rapid development of muscle paralysis, absent reflexes, absence of fever, and absence of a likely cause. I don't know what the fuck happened. I didn't do anything. Uh-oh. Did you have diarrhea 6 weeks ago? Yes? Probably. When was the last time I ate Mexican food? When was the last time I ate fast food? Because I probably had diarrhea the next morning. And if I didn't, there's something wrong with me. Okay. This is the thing that's in just about every vaccine commercial that exists. There's a warning against GBS or about GBS. An increased risk of GBS syndrome is associated with a small portion of those who receive the vaccine. I mean, this is just insane. I don't see how any of this would really hold up in court. Well, it probably happens because of this, Your Honor. Well, it's all these different things, and it might be this, but it's less than than 0.00025% of this, and it's less than 0.00004% of this. But hey, let's make rules and laws regarding this shit. It's such a small percentage. It's so funny. If these numbers are accurate, it's really just this small percentage of shit. There's shit. I mean, I would imagine there's a 0.00004% chance of you getting just about anything from anything. If we're gonna look at it like that. Oh. So
he only boy. He don't know what it is when a man look out the window and see all the rest of his life stretching before.
is this the girl?
But a thing like
This is the young girl that's supposed to be interested in this man?
that man can act like foolish old goat a little bit and you can forgive him. But now I get letter from Cousin Victor, I look out, I see my life filled with ugly needs. They get it.
Cerebro or cerebro spinal fluid analysis. Cerebrospinal fluid analysis through a lumbar spinal puncture. That's fucking awesome. And nerve conduction studies are supportive investigations commonly performed in the diagnosis of GBS. Yeah, go ahead and puncture my spinal cord. That sounds awesome. Lumbar spinal puncture. That sounds awesome. Testing for anti-ganglioside antibodies is often performed, but their contribution to diagnosis is usually limited. Blood tests are generally performed to exclude. LOL, no biggie. What's no biggie? You talking about that old man with the young girl? That's pretty gross. Sorry about whatever sort of shit you got going on there. Blood tests are generally performed to exclude the possibility of another cause for weakness, such as a low level of potassium in the blood. An abnormality, low level of sodium in the blood, is often encountered in GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome. Oh, the puncture. Okay, cool. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, the puncture, no biggie. I gotcha. Sure it is. Sounds fine. I know when my wife got her epidurals, that shit hurt her like a motherfucker. She said that hurt more than anything else. This has been attributed to the inappropriate secretion of antidiuretic hormone, leading to a relative retention of water. In many cases, magnetic resonance imaging of the spinal cord is performed to distinguish between Guillain-Barré syndrome and other conditions causing limb weakness, such as spinal cord compression. If an MRI scan shows enhancement in the nerve roots, this may be indicative of GBS. In children, this feature is present in 95% of scans, but it is not specific to GBS syndrome, so other confirmation is also needed. I mean, again, why say it if it's not a part? Cerebral spinal fluid envelops the brain and the spine. The lumbar puncture or spinal tap is the removal of a small amount of the fluid using a needle inserted between the lumbar vertebrae. Ugh. Blah. I'm sure you don't need that. Characteristic findings in Guillain-Barré syndrome are an elevated protein level, usually greater than 0.55 GL, and fewer than 10 white blood cells per cubic millimeter of fluid. Albuminosylate dissociation. This pattern distinguishes Guillain-Barré syndrome from other conditions such as lymphoma and polio. They call it poliomyelitis. But it's polio. I'm telling you, it's fucking polio. That's why they have to distinguish it. Oh, I know it seems like polio, but it's not. It's this other thing, GBS. And the only way we know that is because we do the special test that you can't do at home. You just have to trust us that we're telling you the truth. Elevated, in which both protein and this, this pattern distinguishes Guillain-Barré from other conditions in lymphoma and polio, in which both the protein and the cell count are elevated. Elevated CSF protein levels are found in approximately 50% of the patients in the first 3 days after onset of weakness, which increases to 80% after the first week. So about half of the people. Think about how fucked up that is. That's like, it might rain today. The weather report should say there's a 50-50 chance it's going to rain every day, because it just might. Jenna Jameson supposedly has GBS, but she swears she didn't take the jab, yet she traveled in 2021 and 20. So I call BS. I mean, she's had multiple jabs, I'm sure, in her life, and I'm not just making dick jokes there. I'm saying, especially in the profession she's in, she's probably gotten something somewhere at some point. But when it comes to an actress or an actor, like, I don't know why we believe anything they say. It's fucking stupid. They're actors and actresses. Trump is a fucking actor. Why nobody understands that? See, in my mind, I'm crazy and all. There's East Coast Hollywood and there's West Coast Hollywood. There's a reason why, the original Hollywood was the East Coast. That's where all the movies and shit were made. But they moved it to the West Coast for a myriad of reasons. But it also separates the East Coast, where we get the news and the information side of entertainment, from the West Coast, where we get the entertainment side of entertainment. But when people don't understand the idea that do you know how fucking crazy it is to think our news cycle renews itself every 24 hours? And they just happen to come up with everything that's in the news program without any fuck ups, without, other than stumbling here and there, but without any system real fuck ups, nothing. Like they produce a new news story a new news show every 24 hours. Good Morning America is a new show every 24 hours. Like, that's just no problem. So, like, when it comes to, any of these fucks, they're actors, they're actresses. They've had classes in how to convey whatever they want. The character, what the character means, the emotions, make that character real. They've learned how to do that. Trusting actors and actresses is fucking stupid. I saw something today where somebody else finally called the Terrence Howard thing a distraction. I don't know why everybody's falling for that shit. What he's talking about doesn't fucking matter. Terrence Howard thing is just, it's something to make you, one, feel stupid because you're not going to be able to understand so much of it. But two, to distract you from Israel. Why is it, if Terrence Howard is so fucking brilliant, why isn't he talking about Israel? and the fucking genocide of all these innocent people. Like, it's all right there. Why isn't any of them talking about it? That should be the only thing people are talking about. Not the only, the main thing people are talking about. Especially, the people that are like in the know, the truthers, all of it. We could argue about shit from the past all day. We could argue about all this stuff I've been talking about today, where we have to just rely on the information that we're given. And it's all this distraction that we only know what they want us to know. The limits of what we know are what they want us to know. And until we can overthrow they and get the real answers, it really doesn't matter. That's why I really have such a hard time even doing. I like knowing things. I like knowing what I'm supposed to know, and I always want to be the smartest guy in the room. It's a fault of mine, we'll say. So I'm always trying to find stuff out and look at things, but the reality is, all of this is I'm learning the bullshit side of things that they want us to know, because this shit is so fucking stupid. And of course, they're not going to acknowledge that they fucking absolutely know that vaccines cause this shit, and it's part of vaccines. It's why vaccines exist. They're not going to say that shit anywhere. Repeating the lumbar puncture during the disease course is not recommended. The protein levels may rise after treatment has been administered. Directly assessing nerve conduction of electrical impulses can exclude other causes of acute muscle weakness, as well as distinguish the different types of GBS syndrome. Needle electromyography and EMG, I've had those. That's fun. And nerve conduction studies may be performed. In the first 2 weeks, these investigations may not show any abnormality. Neurophysiology studies are not required for the diagnosis. Okay, so how many people are actually getting this testing done within the first 2 weeks of symptoms? I mean, it's going to take at least a week for you to get your appointment with the EMG. They're going to be like, okay, we're going to set you up for an EMG. You're going to go home and call, and, we'll set it up, and they'll set it up for the next week or whatever it is. But the idea that somebody's hands and feet are like slightly numb for a couple days, and that they just run to the doctor and get the shit tested. You know how many people that wouldn't get that shit tested for the first many weeks, maybe till it's too late, depending on how it progresses? Formal criteria exist for each of the main subtypes of Guillain-Barré syndrome, AIDP and AMAN-AMSAN, but these may misclassify some cases, particularly where there is reversible conduction failure. And therefore, changes to these criteria have been proposed. Sometimes, repeated testing may be helpful. A number of subtypes of Guillain-Barré syndrome are recognized. Despite this, many people have overlapping symptoms that can make the classification difficult in individual cases. All types have partial forms. For instance, some people experience only isolated eye movement or coordination problems. These are thought to be a subtype of Miller-Fisher syndrome and have similar anti-ganglioside antibody patterns. Fucking nonsense, man. Type: acute inflammatory demyelinating polyradiculoneuropathy. That's AIDP. I love that it's got ridiculous in it, basically. Symptoms: sensory symptoms and muscle weakness, often with cranial nerve weakness and autonomic involvement. Most common in Europe and North America. That's the population affected? Wait, what? Different places experience different types of shit? That sounds like a different bunch of ingredients to me. Nerve conduction studies, demyelinating polyneuropathy, antiganglioside antibodies, no clear association. Acute motor axonal neuropathy, that's a man. Isolated muscle weakness without sensory symptoms in less than 10%. Cranial nerve involvement, uncommon. Rare in Europe and North America, a substantial portion, 30 to 65%, in Asia and Central South America, sometimes called Chinese paralytic syndrome. What the fuck? Axonal neuropathy, polyneuropathy, normal sensory action potential, and those things don't matter. So that one was acute motor axonal neuropathy. This one is acute motor and sensory axonal neuropathy. Severe muscle weakness similar to a man, but with sensory loss. The nerve conduction study shit doesn't matter. The next type is the pharyngeal cervical brachial variant. Weakness, particularly of the throat muscles and face, neck, and shoulder muscles. Generally normal, sometimes axonal neuropathy in arms. Okay. And the Miller-Fisher syndrome. Ataxia. What's ataxia? Ataxia is a neurological sign consisting of lack of voluntary coordination of muscle movements that can include gait abnormality, speech changes, and abnormalities in eye movements that indicates dysfunction of parts of the nervous system that coordinate movements, such as the cerebellum. Okay. This variant occurs more commonly in men than in women, 2-to-1 ratio. Cases typically occur in the spring, and the average age occurrence is 43 years old. Wow, that's fucking weird. Other diagnostic entities are often included in the spectrum of Guillain-Barré syndrome, Bickerstaff's brainstem encephalitis, BBE, for instance, is part of the group of conditions now regarded as forms of Miller-Fisher syndrome, as well as a related condition labeled acute ataxic somnolence, where coordination problems and drowsiness are present, but no muscle weakness can be detected. So you're just tired. BBE is characterized by the rapid onset of ophthalmoplegia, ataxia, and the disturbance of consciousness, and may be associated with absent or decreased tendon reflexes, as well as Babinski's sign. It's Babinski's sign. A plantar reflex is a reflex cited when the sole of the foot is stimulated with a burnt instrument. The reflex can take one of two forms. In healthy adults, the plantar reflex causes a downward response of the hallux flaxion. An upward response extension of the hallux is known as the Babinski response or the Babinski sign, named after the neurologist Joseph Babinski. The presence of the Babinski sign can identify disease of the spinal cord and brain in adults and also exists as a primitive reflex in infants. I don't understand. The reflex occurs upon stroking the sole of the foot with a blunt object such as a pen. If the reflex occurs in adults, as illustrated at the bottom, it may be due to nerve damage or disease. Where your big toe goes whoop, I guess. Well, first described in the medical literature by Babinski in 1896, the reflex has been identified as in art at least as early as Botticelli's Virgin and Child with an Angel painted in the mid 15th century. Oh, I'd love to see that. Let's see. Hey, look at that baby's toe. The baby's toe's doing it. That means it's the thing. It's the thing. Get the fuck out of here. Okay. The course of the disease is usually, this back to GBS, monophasic, but recurrent episodes have been reported. MRI abnormalities in the brainstem have been reported in 11%. Whether isolated acute sensory loss can be regarded as a form of Guillain-Barré syndrome is a matter of dispute. That is a rare occurrence compared to GBS with muscle weakness but no sensory symptoms. I don't give this shit. Plasmapheresis and intravenous immunoglobulins, IVIG, are the two main immunotherapy treatments for GBS. Plasmapheresis attempts to reduce the body's attack on the nervous system by filtering antibodies out of the bloodstream. So if they take your antibodies out and then you get sick, they call it something else. You see how that works? That's like how the AIDS medicine shuts down the autoimmune response, which is what AIDS is supposed to do. But they say that, oh yeah, and then he dies right afterwards and they call it AIDS. These two treatments are equally effective, but a combination of the two is not significantly better than either alone. Plasmapheresis speeds recovery when used within 4 weeks of the onset of symptoms. IVIG works as well as plasmapheresis when started within 2 weeks of the onset of symptoms and has fewer complications. Again, how many people are getting this shit, getting the testing done, getting the results of the testing and everything within the first 2 weeks of symptoms? You would at least be like a few days in before you go, okay, something's really wrong here. I got to get to the doctor. Call the doctor, and they'd be like, all right, we can get you in a week from Thursday. Like, what the fuck is going on here? IVIG is usually used first because of its ease of administration and safety. The risks include occasionally causing liver inflammation or, in rare cases, kidney failure. Hey, glucocorticoid I don't know, have not been found to be effective in speeding recovery and could potentially delay recovery. So why the fuck would you include that? Respiratory failure may require intubation of the trachea and breathing support through mechanical ventilation, generally on an intensive care unit. The need for Ventilatory support can be anticipated by measurement of two spirometry-based breathing tests, the forced vital capacity (FVC) and the negative ins- ins- inspiratory force (NIF). Inspiratory and FVC of less than 15 blah blah are considered markers of severe respiratory pain. While pain is common in people with Guillain-Barré syndrome, studies comparing different types of pain medication are insufficient to make a recommendation as to which should be used. Oh, that's weird. Can't make a recommendation there. Not opiates though. Following the acute phase, around 40% of people require intensive rehabilitation with the help of a multidisciplinary team to focus on improving activities of daily living, ADLs. Studies into the subject have been limited, but it is likely that intensive rehabilitation improves long-term symptoms. Teams may include physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, social workers, psychologists, and other allied health professionals and nurses. That's a lot. Who can afford that? The team usually works under the supervision of a neurologist or a rehabilitation physician directing treatment goals. Physiotherapy interventions include strength, endurance, and I don't give a fuck about this. Whatever. Strength, endurance, and gait training with graduated increases in mobility, maintenance of posture and alignment, as well as joint function. Occupational therapy aims to improve everyday function with domestic and community tasks, as well as driving and work. Home modifications, gait aids, orthotics, and splints may be provided. Speech language pathology input may be required in those with speech and swallowing problems, as well as to support communication in those who require ongoing breathing support, often through a tracheostomy. Jesus. Nutritional support may be provided by the team and by dietitians. Psychologists may provide counseling and support. Psychological interventions may also be required for anxiety, fear, and depression. Guillain-Barré syndrome can lead to death as a result of many complications, severe infections, blood clots, and cardiac arrest, likely due to autonomic neuropathy. Autonomic neuropathy. That sounds wrong. Despite optimum care, this occurs in about 5% of the cases. Wow, that's huge. It's way more than COVID. There is a variation in the rate and extent of recovery. The prognosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome is determined mainly by age. Those over 40 may have a poorer outcome, and by the severity of the symptoms after 2 weeks. Furthermore, those who experience diarrhea before the onset of the disease have a worse prognosis. Are you kidding me? If you had diarrhea within 6 weeks, come on. On the nerve conduction study, the presence of conduction block predicts poorer outcome at 6 months. In those who have received intravenous immunoglobulins, a smaller increase in I lower G big G in the blood 2 weeks after administration is associated with poorer mobility outcomes at 6 months than those whose I lower G big G level increase substantially. If the disease continues to progress beyond 4 weeks, or there are multiple fluctuations in the severity more than 2 and 8 weeks, the diagnosis may be chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, which is treated differently. Again, that's the lining of your brain swelling, chronic inflammatory demyelinating. So myelinating is losing it. So how is inflammatory? In research studies, the outcome for an episode of Guillain-Barré syndrome is recorded on a scale from 0 to 6, where 0 denotes complete healthy, 1, very minor symptoms but able to run. 2, able to walk but not run. 3, requiring a stick or other support. 4, confined to a bed or chair. 5, requiring long-term respiratory support. 6, death. The health-related quality of life (HRQL) after an attack of Guillain-Barré syndrome can be significantly impaired. About a fifth are unable to walk unaided after 6 months. About a fifth are unable to walk unaided after 6 months and may experience chronic pain, fatigue, and difficulty with work, education, hobbies, and social activities. HRQL improves significantly in the first year. It's weird how they give you the numbers. Like in research studies, the outcome of an episode of Guillain-Barré syndrome is recorded on a scale from 0 to 6. Well, what is the average number? And give me that. In Western countries, the number of new episodes per year has been estimated to be between 0.89 and 1.89 cases per 100,000 people. Children and young adults are less likely to be affected than the elderly. The relative risk increased by 20% for every decade of life. What? Okay. Estimated between 0.89 and 1.89 cases per 100,000 people. Children and young adults are less likely to be affected than the elderly. The relative risk increases by 20% for every decade of life. So by 50, you have 100% increase in your chances of getting it. Like, what? Do you understand how that's what? Men are more likely to develop Guillain-Barré syndrome than women. The relative risk for men is 1.78 compared to women. The distribution of subtype varieties between countries. That's a sentence. The distribution of subtypes. Oh. The distribution of subtypes varies between countries. In Europe and the United States, 80% of the people with Guillain-Barré syndrome have the demyelinating subtype AIDP, and AMAN affects only a small number, 6.7%. In Asia and Central South America, the proportion is significantly higher, 30 to 65%. This may be related to the exposure to different kinds of infection, but also the genetic characteristics of that population. Miller-Fisher variant is thought to be more common in Southeast Asia. All right, I read everything I could on it. And I have nothing but questions. That is some fucked up crazy shit, man. Wow. All right. Well, that's that. Fuck Israel. Oh. And pedophiles kill yourself, obviously.